All right, let's get back into the show.
Let's do it.
Let's do Why Don't They Just?
Uh-oh. Why don't they just get it together?
Are we back?
I think we're back.
Oh.
What just happened?
Yeah, that
Be
was
excellent to each other.
Most abrupt transition ever. It's almost like, why don't they just transition better or something,
Why don't we just get into Why Don't They Just? So, stressful Gengar. Yeah. Gengar?
Ooh, Jeff or GIF. Ooh.
I know, right?
Ooh, is it a giraffe
so this is from...
or a giraffe?
Giraffe. So, he asks, why don't they just make firefighting rockets, either large pad launched or air launched to fight fires?
Sorry, that's funny.
Seems like that would create more fires, doesn't it?
Well,
yeah, I don't.
How like a rocket that? Okay, this is really ironic. So what? Okay, what is a rocket? Right? It's a cylindrical. Just generally speaking, here, a cylindrical, propelled, flying machine that transports something. But if you need to send it to space, that's like one, way. But if you need to keep it here on Earth, you probably need a way for it to stay in the air. Like maybe adding wings to it would be a good start. And then maybe having a way to steer it. So maybe like a pilot would be another way that you could make it happen. And instead of like rocket engines, you probably don't need that. You could have just jet engines and even wheels, so you could reuse it. I think that's a great idea. Yeah, just some modifications there.
I'm guessing maybe he's thinking, and I'm saying he. I don't know if it's a he or she. It doesn't say, but you see the starship hop or the star hopper, and they're kind of like floating over. Like I guess the idea is like if you could float over and just like dump water, like you can be more pinpoint.
Or I think the idea maybe
but...
is ICBM style. Like if you know of a fire that's like immediately outbreaking, and it's might take hours to actually assemble a firefighter team to go, adjust the perimeter. You could literally launch like an ICBM and have it pinpoint accurately, seriously launch and land in that spot within 10 minutes.
But would it like explode prior to getting there? Like you don't want it to hit the ground.
Right. Well, if it was a solid propellant booster, something like that, where it would be totally expelled of all of its propellant by the time it lands. And so it would have to have a lot of like fire suppressant on board with it. Yeah, that's where I'm going.
But
you're pushing.
So are you saying like it would have like basically a payload of foam?
Yeah, of like
or water
fire
or something to suppress it? But there's another thought is like a concussion kind of thing. If you actually blow up,
right,
and eliminate all the oxygen, that would put out the fire, wouldn't it?
That could. It can, yeah.
I mean, it would have to be huge for the fires that are going on right now.
Light a nuke
and what
right
about like
the
structures and the animals and the things that are alive nearby?
We can nuke the hurricanes, guys. Just like we can nuke the fires. Nukes are the nuke Mars. Every problem can be solved with nukes.
There's a tornado forming.
Yeah. So is that your guys' answers? Joe, do you want to elaborate more? Because I kind of interrupted with how I interpreted it.
It was mostly kidding, but I know that there is, there's that school of thought that if you blast a small fire with enough force, it'll put out the fire because it eliminates all the oxygen.
Part of the problem, I'll just say, as someone that's living in a very fire-ridden place at this very moment, is the Valley Fire here, which is just east of us, is larger than the size of Manhattan. So you would need a pretty large missile.
Well, that's where the idea. I think the idea would be like as soon as it's aware of like, oh, we have a forest fire, you preventatively, like before it even gets a chance to spread, you go and launch. Like I said, maybe one that doesn't have any more explosives. You totally deplete it of all propellant or something before it gets there.
We should preemptively just destroy the entire forest. That way there can't be any forest fires. Problem solved.
Exactly.
Well, and if the theory of like fight fire with fire it holds up, I mean, could you stop the current fire with another gender reveal party?
It needs to be just a water, one of those water balloon gender reveal parties. Yeah. I think as far as rockets are a really terrible way to try to lift anything, really. I mean, the rocket equation is a nasty, nasty thing. In order to lift something, it just keeps going. So
it's tyrannical.
Yes, it is the tyranny of the rocket equation. So in order to overcome that, you just have to have these massive. So even a cheap missile, still like a cheap ICBM, is probably still $10 million. Or something like that. Like we're talking about. I mean, granted, these forest fires are costing billions, right? Like there's no argument.
Well,
that.
right. But
at the same time, a plane can carry, those planes that do that can carry 1,000 times the payload, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And, be pretty much there within a really short period of time. Maybe I'd rather invest, instead of $10 million per missile and have a fleet of those, I'd rather invest and get more planes. And
helicopters too. Helicopters are really nice. And like here in San Diego, for example, we have the military, it's an advantage I guess we have is, so the military, they have copious amounts of helicopters. And so they attach these like buckets to them essentially, and they'll go fly to a reservoir, dip it down, fill it up, and then go over to the fire and then dump it right on top of wherever they need it to be. I think the real challenge is...
And it costs only, a little bit of fuel relatively, we'll say 100 gallons. I have no idea. It can last you an hour, and that's relatively cheap compared to the $10 million missile,
In the way, one of the interesting things, the fact that we can just deploy hundreds of these, in hours, but also one of the things that I saw was really interesting as I've been watching the Valley Fire and all this. By the way, did you guys see that San Francisco video that guy shot?
Oh, there's tons. Every video is
you got to show
right
that.
Now.
Yeah, there's one. It looks exactly like Blade Runner. Like it's identical to the movie.
Yeah.
Anyway, so one of the things is they need to make this fire line so the fire won't cross it, and that line needs to be big. And so what they have are like these bulldozers that just go off into the country and just blast through, trying to remove brush and separate things. Obviously, you can't do that in like a forest with giant trees, right? Because a bulldozer wouldn't have a chance on that. But there's a lot of stuff there that I think is interesting. I actually had this idea of what if you could. This is a why don't they just? What if they preemptively created these barriers in the forest, almost like you drew these big lines of like fire lines. That way, if a fire does break out here, it doesn't automatically spread everywhere. Like it's stopped at least for a period of time. I don't know if that's good or bad for the environment, but
roads do that. But have like
like a road.
More of them.
Now it can still jump a road. Like I actually in 2007 when I was here,
definitely.
And the fires were absolutely insane. They were crazier than here. Like this town called Solana Beach got evacuated. Like a beach town got evacuated. That's how crazy they were. I was actually on the freeway, and a really big tree. I was driving up, and we all got stopped, and there was a canyon fire, and this really, really big tree was on fire and fell onto the freeway. And then it caught the other canyon on the other side on fire.
Yep.
I saw that happen, and I was like, "Oh my god! Like this is
that's
nuts."
When it gets really scary. Yeah. So anyway, solving forest fires. I just don't know if rockets are the most economical or least explosive way to do that. But I mean, I kind of get the idea though of like instant deployment. Like again, if
I didn't know how much.
I'll pay $10 million to avoid $80 billion, of damages.
I think the argument is there's just better ways to do it, right? But how much of a payload? Yeah, so you're saying that a plane could potentially carry a lot more than
way more.
A rocket.
Yeah, way like orders of magnitude. Like a Falcon Heavy, for instance, can lift about, if you expend all three cores at a cost of $120 million, can lift about 60,000 pounds. So like almost what is that, 28 metric tons or something like that.
It's like five Americans.
60 metric tons. It's an insane amount of pound. It is a lot, but that costs a lot of money too.
So could you, to expand on the why don't they justness, could you take a Falcon Heavy instead of
the upper stage?
what other methalox or whatever fuels in the 2 side boosters, put water and just have the other one hover as it goes and just blast water from the other 2?
Water and fire, because you're blasting water and fire. Don't
It
forget.
just turns to steam.
Yeah, just steam reform.
It just makes it really muggy. It doesn't really do it. It just makes it worse. You just hate it now.
Oh, man.
Like, I'm moving to Florida. Oh, wait. Damn it.
Well, there we go. In other words, we have no idea. There you go. Why don't they just do it? Just do it.
I like the rocket with wings and a pilot. That sounds like a solid answer.
An X-15, basically. Yeah.
So there was a second why don't they just, if you wanted
Let's hear
to
it.
jump into that real quick. Might be a simpler answer on this one, but here we go. This is from Boudreaux, the one and only. It says, why don't they just build a Hyperloop to the Starship launch sites? Makes the distance they need to be clear of a non-issue for people and equipment. Because we know they're going to be having to do it offshore, right?
Eventually, at some point. They'll,
yeah.
That is
Just
the
because
idea,
it's
isn't
so
it?
loud.
I thought this was the idea.
It definitely is
I don't know.
the eventual idea for sure.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because, I remember the BFR thing, intraplanetary hops. It was like Manhattan or something, and you took a Hyperloop out to it on the water.
No,
right?
you took a regular boat
Oh,
was the concept,
Yeah,
was that video. And then everyone's like, why don't
Yeah,
you
I
just...
remember it being a boat.
And it was then literally this question, why don't you just build a Hyperloop? And then I think even Elon on Twitter said something like, eventually, of course.
Good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would it be underwater though? I mean, could you build a Hyperloop on the surface of the water?
No, but you can go under like like most.
Well, if you're
Have
in
you
a
ever
tube,
seen like a cross section of tunnels that are under, like under rivers and stuff or big canyons, and like how they go? A lot of them go way deeper than I ever imagined.
Oh, really?
For some reason, I always thought like they were just basically at the bottom of the river, or something. Some of these will go like, I'm just like, wait, it's that deep under the water, but yeah.
Well, it's like the
I
internet,
now
right?
have a phobia.
Isn't the internet like that? Like we have these massive cables running across the entire ocean.
Yeah.
That's
And
Yeah,
sharks-
they're like that big around.
And sharks eat
doesn't
them.
that seem kind of Wile E. Coyote?
Yeah,
You know?
absolutely.
you're like,
Yeah.
you're like again, I want to be in the room when someone proposes this idea and other people take it seriously.
Yeah.
Well, I imagine they, science the esh out of it and figured out that that's the better way to do it for,
The
of
most
all the options.
practical for sure.
Is that how it
And
goes, or do you
probably
think
less expensive?
someone has a why don't they just basically, and then someone else has to figure out how to science it up?
Well, that's pretty much the scientific method in a nutshell, is like, hey, why don't we just do that? And then it's everyone's job on that team to figure out why you shouldn't do that. And if everyone's like, no, I can't actually have a good reason why this isn't the worst idea, then it's the best idea,
But it's also an old idea because the first telegram lines, like transatlantic telegram lines, that was like turn of the century. Maybe before that.
Well, and Hyperloop, for instance, is a really old idea in itself. There was like a old subway system
the pneumatic.
that functioned on pneumatics. So it's all this
that's
stuff is
right.
all kind of coming together. So I definitely think especially if there is to be a point-to-point transportation, you can't spend 2 hours on a boat, to get out to the launch pad to take a 45-minute flight.
yeah.
Like that's just not reasonable. So there would
You're
have
like,
to be
yes.
and while they're working on it, so say out of Boca Chica, if they're working on parts and stuff, to be able to get the crew back and forth quickly and not just have this big thing, like I think they absolutely would want to do that.
It doesn't necessarily have to be a Hyperloop that it gets like 1,000 miles an hour, right? Just a train would be fine. That's quick. Like it doesn't necessarily have to be some breakthrough technology, right?
It just needs to be faster than a boat.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
A pontoon boat.
Yeah.
That was my thing. Like, would you need it to be a Hyperloop and get up to crazy speeds if it's only 10 miles out or something?
Even just what they're doing now with cars, if you could go, 160 kilometers in a tunnel for those 10
Yeah.
10 or 20 kilometers. Like that's good enough. You don't need to be just normal.
Or just a helicopter pad.
What was that?
Just a helicopter pad.
It's true.
There's a helicopter out there. man.
Helicopters are expensive though.
And just helicopter into space. I mean, why just skip the middleman?
That's
How about a
always
helicopter into space that's dumping water on forest fires?
well. They've got one on Mars, so obviously it works.
Not yet. On its way, Ben. Don't jump the
its
gun. February.
Whatever. But isn't it funny? That's always the thing that makes me like lose it with sci-fi movies is how there's just like a plane, like a spaceship that just is flying around a planet, and then it just like takes off out of the planet. You're like, what? Wait, no.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, no way. No chance.
I love it in space movies when the vehicle is in space and it'll like turn and like do this like thing. It's like, no.
You just
orbital
go
mechanics,
whichever way you
guys.
want.
Yeah, like, you don't need to like you wouldn't be like pulling some crazy G's or anything. You just point in the direction you're trying to go. And most of the time it's not where you need to go because you have to do orbital mechanics. So it's like you're 90 degrees to where you're trying to go or whatever. And yeah.
That's like me putting. They're like, where the hell? The hole is over here. I'm like, yeah, but look, let's go this way. And then it'll turn, and it doesn't turn. I'm bad. I'm not a good golfer, basically.
So that brings up a question I've always had. Like, how much, like when you see these sort of sci-fi fantasies, like you were just talking about, of like flying through space, of the, boom, 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 and everything. Like, I don't know. I feel like that kind of gets ingrained in our psyches, and we have this idea of like that's what it's supposed to be like. Like that's where we're eventually going to go, right?
Right.
But then the scientists are like, it does not work that way. but like, it fascinates me how often sci-fi ideas from the past are now reality, and maybe they are only reality now because some sci-fi author thought it up 100 years ago or 50 years ago or something.
Mm-hmm.
So how much is Star Wars or, Battlestar Galactica or any of these shows, like how much are we going to see any of that someday later on? Like how much is that like making scientists and engineers like work harder to make it happen just because we all kind of expect it to happen now,
Yeah.
Well,
it's a self-fulfilling
It works a
prophecy
little bit
kind
the
of
other
thing.
way too, right? Like The Martian was largely written, if I remember, kind of by the scientific community. Right, it was kind of crowdsourced. He was posting those blogs, and people were saying, "No, this is wrong. No, this is wrong." So it's kind of like, well, I guess that's not really. I mean, it is science fiction, but it's much more of like a very near-term, realistic version of science fiction.
Yeah, that Andy Weir definitely focuses on like the real science stuff, like how it would really work in practical reality. Kind of. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching this clip from our show. If that's just not enough for you and you want to watch the full episode, you can go to olfpod.com/YT.
And if you want more from us, you can consider becoming a Patreon member. You'll get early access to episodes. You can join our awesome community. You can actually watch us record live and get your name in the credits by going to olfpod.com/Patreon.
So thanks everyone for watching. Check back every Friday for new clips here and new episodes on the main channel.
Thanks, everybody.